Next, please welcome Professor Ki-soo of DongA University. The title of his presentation is Kadok Island, Understanding Through Architecture. He is currently a faculty member in the Department of Architecture at DongA University, where he also serves as the director of the Seokdang Museum. And also, he is the member of the Lighthouse Cultural Heritage Committee under the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and he is dedicated to preserving cultural heritage. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
예, 안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Ki-soo of DongA University. As Ms. Huang mentioned, in the field of architecture, well, it's not always easy to touch upon this topic from the perspective of architecture. Well, especially, when we talk about things from the lens of architecture, some might see it from the perspective of development, whereas I'm focused more on history. So it's about development versus history conservation. And by history, I mean technological changes, understanding of technological changes, and documenting these changes throughout the change of history. We have many maps and photos that show such data, and on the basis of this data, we leave records and documents. These are the records of Busan, and these are the records of architecture. And you can see various data and documents that show architecture of this particular time and its social background. So from these slides, what I want to talk about is, looking around, we still see some of the disappearing, and we see some disappearing cultural heritage that are being destroyed. So what we want to do is to digitalize and restore this data, and with the remaining data, we can replicate this history. So the things that I'm going to talk about during my presentation will be something relevant to the case of Kadok Island as well. So from the two previous presenters, we listened to their stories from the humanities and fisheries perspectives, and I want to put on a lens of more architectural aspect. And once we build this airport, I'd like to talk about how we can reflect this architectural point going forward. So all the humanities aspects were already discussed. And from the natural environment, we have this camellia colony. And we all know that these are very crucial factors. Specifically, the natural cultural heritage. Well, even though these were artificial forests that were developed, still they were conserved very well. This is about the history of Kadok Island, and this was covered by the previous presenters, so let me skip this. And looking at some cultural heritages, we see some castles. Kadok Jinseong Castle, Nulcha Weseong Castle. These are the heritage sites close to Nulcha Strait. But when we visit these sites, it's very difficult to verify this information because these castles are used as elementary school buildings or houses. So without the background knowledge, you do not really understand that they have historic background. And also, from the architectural point of view, this Cheonseong Castle has its original form that is protected. But if you look at this site and if you look at the discovery, it's surrounded with trees and forests. If you think about the lighthouse of Kadokdo, well, some of these heritages are quite visible, whereas these castles are not that visible. We have these tombstones and Yeondae Peak that are heritage sites. Another thing is in the southern part of Kadokdo Island, we have this castle sites along the southern eastern part. And in southern part, including Busan, we have these heritage sites from Joseon dynasty and also from the Japanese colonial era. During the colonial era, well, the previous pictures that we looked at are from modern history, and from now we are looking at some of the photos from the Japanese colonial era, including the battery positions and artillery positions, related bases, and observation posts to operate these artillery. So from the photos on the left-hand side, we see this Wayangport village. And along the village, we see that some of the military sites and observation posts are there, and they're still present. So when we build this Kadok new airport, all of this will be gone. So for architecture, I already told you how we keep records and documents. So on the left-hand side, this is the military sites and heritage. And on the right-hand side, these are the battery positions. And in order to operate these positions, this shows the functions between the two. And when we operate this artillery, this shows how military operations are done, and they are shown in maps on the upper right-hand side. So regarding the roles and functions, we have documentation of such data in maps and drawings. And regarding observation posts and fortresses, from the old drawings, we have this information that is kept in the drawings. So this one shows data for 4 observation posts. And regarding the artillery positions, we have the elevation map. And in recent years, using digital data, we can restore this information using 3D technology. In order to have the 3D recovery data, we need all these drawings. And these are photos, which is a mixture of digital data and real pictures. So technologically, we are this capable. And these are the related data that is documented. And also, these are the barracks and how they changed over time. And to our knowledge, the villages in Kadokdo Island and the military barracks wasn't just born overnight, but it changed slowly from 1905 through 1940, and the lives of people were reflected throughout the process. So the heritages keep the records of over centuries' memories. So some of these photos and some of these drawings might feel quite new, and you can't really tell whether these came from this particular era. But anyway, the data shows how the information, how things changed over time based on this documentation. And using photos, this is the documentation of information based on photos. And the military heritage, as you can see from the left-hand side, it's not just Waeangpo Port, but you can see the area of Kojedo Island and Jinhae Bay. So the message of this slide is the formation of the military heritage. Well, we say that this is from 1904 or 1905, and from the Gangwon-do Province Agreement. Well, there are different treaties that are quite relevant. And at the time, we were enforced to sign a treaty. And regarding the treaty, we have the rights to survey of this area. And in Kadokdo Island, we saw the creation of pacts and regulations with the stationing of Japanese troops on Kadokdo Island. So the military heritages are related to the treaties that were forced to be signed. And in southern part of Korea, you can see these different types of heritages. And this is where the president's condo is located in Jishim Island. And in Japan, in Tsushima Island, we can also see the military heritage as well. Another heritage that we need to look at is we have the lighthouse on Kadokdo Island. So you might think that this would be the culmination of the modern technology, but if you think about the origin, it comes from the beacons of the older times. And it is related to the development of the maritime culture. And on Jeju Island, you can see these lighthouses and beacons, and they are closely related to the lighthouse on Kadokdo Island. And this shows that when the Kadokdo lighthouse was created, this is about securing safety for the lighthouses. And this is the historical record describing the process of the Kadokdo Island. So with the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, we looked at the documentations and verified the information. And at the time, the Palmido Lighthouse in Incheon and Kadokdo Lighthouse were looked at and studied by Bae University. And this shows the general information regarding the establishment of lighthouses. So you might overlook this when you just pass by, but from the humanities perspective, and if you want to look at this issue of Kadokdo Island and Kadokdo Lighthouse, you can actually see that there's a lot of historical element that is closely intertwined. And with the changes, you can see that the crisis is at hand. When we had a similar symposium last time, we did talk about this crisis. And when we have this crisis, we have two divided opinion: development versus development versus conservation. But we believe we have to start from a point thinking how we can make sure that both can exist. So if you think about what's happening in Korea, including Wonju Academy or Cheongju City Hall incident, well, this divided opinion collides, and in this case, we cannot find a solution at all because it will lead to a zero-sum game. Still, before we have that divided opinion, we believe that we can put more thoughts into making sure that these two can coexist. So from the architectural perspective, it covers both the viewpoint from the past and the viewpoint from the present. And regarding the Kadokdo Airport, when I have meetings in Seoul, the case of Kadokdo Airport doesn't seem very persuasive, I agree. And the need to have a new port on Kadokdo Island, or the need for a new airport, well, I believe that anyone would agree on the necessity of having such an airport. But regarding how to resolve this, I believe that local community has to have the capability, and Cheongju City is at a stage where they discard this idea, and Wonju was another case that was at an impasse. So as an architect, I always put a thought into what's changing and what is not changing. And design was all about corresponding to changes. But history is about pursuit of something that doesn't change. So if these two different things can coexist, and actually making sure that these two can coexist is something that we can make possible. So when the cultural heritage disappears and the recovery of cultural heritages, these are not the most important thing, but what's important is to protect its original form and develop them into future heritages. And for that, we believe that we have to pool our wisdoms and join our forces. We don't need to look at overseas cases to draw some more examples. And we know that examples from the modern period can serve as a lesson for the future. So when we have a discussion around conservation versus development, what we want to see more is discussions around the coexistence of both conservation and development. And before we are faced with real issues, we believe we can start the discussion at this moment. And I believe that the necessity of having a round table that was presented by the previous presenter was a very valid point. Thank you.
방금 가덕도
New airport on Kadokdo Island and coexistence of conservation and development. These were the messages.